If she dies before Saturday, we inherit everything. Those words, whispered by my own son, nearly killed me faster than any heart attack ever could. Let me back up a bit, honey. My name's Eleanor Patterson, but everyone calls me Nana. I'm 78, widowed for 20 years, and until last Thursday, I thought I knew my family pretty well. I'd gone to Harold's office that morning. Harold's been my lawyer for 30 years, to update my will. These old bones aren't what they used to be, and after my heart attack last year, well, I figured it was time to get my affairs in order. My son Michael and his wife Sarah have been living with me, taking care of me. Sweet as pie, both of them. Or so I thought. The appointment was supposed to take all day, but Harold's efficient. We wrapped up by 3, and I found myself driving home 4 hours earlier than expected. I was actually excited. Maybe I'd surprise them, start dinner early. I used my key to slip in through the kitchen door, quiet as a mouse. That's when I heard their voices drifting from the living room. The lawyer said the current will expire Saturday if she doesn't sign the new one, Sarah was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze. Harold hadn't said any such thing. So if something happens to her before Saturday, Michael replied, and my blood turned to ice water, we inherit everything under the old will. My legs went weak. I grabbed the kitchen counter to keep from falling. Those heart medications can be tricky, Sarah continued. Sometimes people accidentally take too many. And she's been so forgetful lately. I don't remember how I got back to my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely start the engine. These were the people I'd opened my home to. The son I'd raised alone after his father died. They were discussing my death like a business transaction. I drove to Mel's Diner and sat in a corner booth for 2 hours, nursing coffee that tasted like sawdust. Then I called Harold. Harold, I need you to listen carefully. My life might depend on it. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment. Eleanor, he finally said, we're going to give them exactly what they think they want. And it's going to be the biggest mistake of their lives. That night, I went home and acted normal. Chatted about my day, took my pills, went to bed early. But I wasn't sleeping. I was listening to every creak in the house, wondering if they'd try something that very night. Friday morning, Sarah was extra attentive. How are you feeling, Nana? You look a little pale. Maybe you should rest today. Michael kept hovering. Mom, don't overdo it. Take it easy. Their concern felt poisonous. I played along. Complained about feeling dizzy. Forgot to eat breakfast. Even stumbled a little on the stairs. Though honestly, the stress was getting to me. I could see them exchanging looks. That afternoon I called Harold. It's time. He arrived at 3 with papers. I made a big show of signing the new will in front of Michael and Sarah, talking about how this new arrangement would change everything. The relief on their faces was sickening. What they didn't know was that this will contained a very special clause. If I died under suspicious circumstances before the following Tuesday, everything would go to charity, and a private investigation would be launched. Any family member found responsible would face criminal prosecution. I smiled sweetly. Well, that's settled. The panic that flashed across their faces told me everything. Saturday morning, I woke up very much alive. Michael and Sarah were unusually quiet at breakfast, stealing glances at each other. At 10 o'clock, I made my announcement. Michael, Sarah, sit down. We need to talk. I looked at my son, this man I'd carried for 9 months, raised for 18 years, loved for 45 years. Thursday evening, when I came home early, I heard every word you said. I repeated their conversation verbatim. Sarah's face went white. Michael just stared. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady. You have until tomorrow morning to pack and leave my house. Sarah stammered about misunderstandings, but I held up my hand. I'm not just disappointed that you wanted my money. I'm heartbroken that you were willing to see me dead for it. I pulled out a copy of the will I'd signed. Let me read you something interesting. When I finished reading about the investigation clause, Sarah actually gasped. Michael finally found his voice. Mom, we weren't really going to, we were just talking. Son, there's a difference between being scared about the future and planning your mother's death. They left Sunday morning. Michael tried calling, but I didn't answer. Sarah sent a letter I threw away without reading. I changed my will one final time. Everything goes to my other son Robert, my grandchildren, and the animal shelter where I volunteer. I also had security cameras installed and moved my bedroom downstairs. Last month, I heard Michael and Sarah are divorcing. Funny how quickly love dies when money's not involved. As for me, I'm still here, still breathing, still very much alive. Every morning I wake up and smile. Some days the best revenge is simply outliving those who bet against you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you exactly what happened that Thursday afternoon, because every word matters. Every single whispered word that changed my life forever. I parked in my usual spot next to the old oak tree my late husband planted 40 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Coming home to the house where I'd built a lifetime of memories, only to discover the people living in it were planning my death. My hands were still shaking from the lawyer's office, not from fear, but from relief. I'd finally updated my will to include both my boys equally. Robert, my younger son who lives in California with his family, would finally get his fair share. And I'd set up trust funds for all my grandchildren. It felt good, responsible. Like I was leaving this world a little better than I found it. I used my key to enter through the side door, the one that leads straight into the kitchen. That door's been sticking lately, and I made a mental note to ask Michael to oil the hinges. I was planning to surprise them, maybe start dinner early. Thursday was always pot roast night, and I thought I'd get a head start on the vegetables. But as I stepped inside, careful not to let the door slam, I heard voices coming from the living room. Michael and Sarah were talking in hushed tones, and something in their voices made me freeze. There was an urgency there, a secretiveness that sent warning bells through my mind. I set my purse down quietly on the kitchen counter, next to the ceramic bowl where I keep my keys. The same bowl Sarah had admired when they first moved in. So quaint, she'd said. So authentically vintage. I should have known then. Sarah never met an antique she didn't want to inherit. The lawyer said the current will expires this Saturday if she doesn't sign the new one, Sarah was whispering. After that, everything defaults to the state. My blood ran cold. That wasn't true. My lawyer had said no such thing. Harold would never have told me something like that without explaining it thoroughly. He's been handling legal matters for my family since before Michael was born. But the confidence in Sarah's voice, the certainty, made my skin crawl. Then Michael's voice cut through me like a knife, and I realized I was listening to my son, my baby boy, plan my death. So if something happens to her before Saturday, he said, and I could hear him moving around the living room, probably pacing the way he did when he was nervous. If she has another heart attack or falls down those stairs, we inherit everything automatically under the old will. The house, the savings, everything. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, so hard my knuckles went white. The granite was cold under my palms, real and solid, while everything else in my world tilted sideways. This was Michael talking. My Michael, who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Who cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly when he was 7. Who held my hand at his father's funeral and promised he'd always take care of me. Sarah's response made my knees buckle. Those new heart medications can be dangerous. Sometimes people take too many by accident. And she's been so forgetful lately. The medication she was talking about, my heart pills that keep me alive, sat in a weekly dispenser right there on the kitchen counter, not 3 feet from where I was standing. The same pills Sarah helped me organize every Sunday night, counting them out with such careful attention. Such loving concern. Now I understood why. She has been more confused lately, Michael agreed, and I could hear the calculation in his voice. Yesterday she couldn't remember where she put her reading glasses. They were on her head the whole time. They were laughing now. Soft, conspiratorial chuckles that made my stomach turn. They were laughing about my forgetfulness, about the small indignities of aging that I tried so hard to hide. Laughing about how easy it would be to kill me. The stairs would be simpler, Sarah continued, and I heard the sound of ice clinking in a glass. She was making herself a drink while discussing my murder. More believable. Everyone knows old people fall downstairs all the time. Especially at night, Michael added. When she gets up to use the bathroom. Those hardwood steps can be slippery. I thought about all the times I'd climbed those stairs in the dark, trying not to wake them. All the times I'd gripped the banister, careful with my footing. I'd been protecting myself from an accidental fall, never imagining I needed to protect myself from them. We'd have to make sure it looks natural, Sarah said. Call 911 right away, seemed devastated. I can handle the crying part. You're good at that, Michael said, and there was something almost admiring in his voice. Remember when you convinced my mother you were too sick to help with Christmas dinner last year? More laughter. They were bonding over their ability to deceive me. To manipulate the woman who'd opened her home to them when they couldn't afford their own mortgage payments. Who'd paid for Sarah's dental work and Michael's car repairs without ever asking for anything in return except a little companionship in my old age. The timing has to be perfect, Sarah continued. It has to happen before Saturday or we lose everything. What if she doesn't die? Michael asked. What if she's just injured? Then we'll have to help her along, Sarah replied, and the casual way she said it, like she was discussing helping me with groceries, made my vision blur with tears and rage. I had to grip the kitchen counter to keep from falling. These were the people I'd opened my home to, the son I'd raised with all my love, talking about my death like it was a business transaction. Worse, they were discussing making it happen. Planning it. Timing it. My mind raced back over the past few weeks, looking for signs I'd missed. Sarah's sudden interest in my medication schedule. Michael's insistence that I shouldn't drive at night anymore. The way they'd both encouraged me to take that sleeping pill when I had trouble falling asleep, even though I'd told them it made me groggy the next day. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been living in my house, eating my food, accepting my generosity, while plotting my murder? We should probably seem more worried about her health, Sarah was saying. Start mentioning to the neighbors how concerned we are. How she's been declining. Good thinking, Michael replied. Mrs. Henderson next door already thinks she's getting senile. She told me last week that Mom asked her the same question twice in one conversation. They'd been laying the groundwork, building a narrative, making sure that when I died, when they killed me, everyone would nod sadly and say what a blessing it was that I'd gone quickly, that at least I hadn't suffered. But I would suffer. I was suffering right now, listening to my son discuss my death with the same tone he used to plan vacation itineraries. Should we do it tonight? Sarah asked, and my heart nearly stopped. Too soon after the lawyer visit, Michael replied. Better to wait until tomorrow night. Give it a day. Tomorrow night. Friday. They were going to kill me Friday night, and by Saturday morning, they'd be grieving heirs to my entire estate. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs. The heart that had already betrayed me once with that attack last year. The heart that Sarah was so conveniently concerned about. The heart that apparently wouldn't need to work much longer if they had their way. I should probably cook her favorite meal tomorrow, Sarah continued. Make it special. A last supper, you know? More laughter. They were actually laughing about my last meal. That's when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a rubber band stretched too far. The fear was still there, cold and sharp in my chest, but alongside it came something else. Something harder. Rage. Pure, clean rage. I'd buried my husband. I'd raised 2 boys alone. I'd survived cancer, a heart attack, and the death of my parents. I'd worked 2 jobs to put my children through college, and never asked for so much as a thank you card. And now my own son, my flesh and blood, was planning to murder me for money. Not if I could help it. I took a deep breath, forced my hands to stop shaking, and quietly picked up my purse from the counter. I had to get out of that house. Had to think. Had to plan. Because if Michael and Sarah thought they were going to inherit my estate, they had another thing coming. I might be 78 years old, but I wasn't dead yet. And if they thought I was going to go quietly into that good night, they'd clearly forgotten who raised them. I opened the side door with the same care I'd used to close it, slipping back outside like a ghost. The afternoon sun felt different on my face now, sharper, more precious. How many more afternoons did I have? How many more sunsets? That depended on how smart I was over the next 24 hours. I walked to my car on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, someone much older and more fragile than I felt inside. But my mind was crystal clear now, sharper than it had been in months. Michael and Sarah had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their target. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. I crept back outside, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out right there in the driveway. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, worried about my heart failing from shock, when my own son was planning to help it along tomorrow night. But I wasn't going to let shock paralyze me. I've survived the Great Depression when we ate potato soup for dinner 3 nights a week. I raised 2 boys as a widow after Frank died in that factory accident, working double shifts at the diner while taking night classes to become a bookkeeper. I built a life from nothing, scraped together enough money to buy this house with its creaky stairs and stubborn side door. I wasn't about to become a victim now. Not when I was this close to the finish line. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, forcing myself to breathe slowly and think clearly. My hands had stopped shaking, but my mind was racing. Michael and Sarah had given me less than 24 hours to live. That meant I had less than 24 hours to outsmart them. The afternoon sun slanted through my windshield, warming my face, and for a moment I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd lost today. Not my life, not yet, but something almost as precious. The son I thought I knew. The family I thought I had. The peace I'd found in my old age, thinking I was surrounded by people who loved me. But grief was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. I had work to do. I drove to Murphy's Coffee House down the street, the little place where I met my book club every Tuesday. Betty Murphy, the owner, waved at me from behind the counter, and I managed a smile that felt like it might crack my face in half. "The usual Mrs. Patterson?" she asked, already reaching for the coffee pot. "Please, dear." I chose a corner booth where I could see the door, though I wasn't sure who I was watching for. Michael and Sarah thought I wouldn't be home until 8. That gave me 4 hours to figure out how to save my own life. Betty brought over my coffee, black, 1 sugar, and a slice of her famous apple pie. "You look a little pale today," she said, her kind eyes creased with concern. "Everything all right?" If only she knew. "Just tired, sweetie. Long day." She patted my shoulder and left me alone with my thoughts and my coffee. I sat there for 2 hours, watching the afternoon crowd filter in and out. Young mothers with strollers, teenagers sharing a milkshake, an elderly couple holding hands over shared Danish. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 3 blocks away, 2 people were planning murder. By 6 o'clock, I had the beginnings of a plan. I called Harold from the payphone outside Murphy's. Even at my age, I'm not stupid about these things. Cell phones can be tracked, calls can be monitored. Harold's been my lawyer for 30 years, ever since Frank died and I needed help with the insurance money and the mortgage. He's seen me through every major decision of my adult life. "Harold," I said when his secretary put me through, "I need you to listen very carefully. My life might depend on it." There was a pause. Harold knows me well enough to know I don't exaggerate. "I'm listening, Eleanor." I told him everything. Every word I'd overheard, every chilling detail of Michael and Sarah's conversation. Harold was quiet for a long moment after I finished. "Jesus Christ, Eleanor." I'd never heard Harold swear before. In 3 decades, the man had never used anything stronger than darn. "Harold, I need to know about my will." "The current one." Papers rustled on his end. "The one from 2018? "Yes, that leaves everything to Michael, with a small provision for Robert and the grandchildren." "But Eleanor, we updated that this morning." "No," I interrupted. "We drew up the new will, but I didn't sign it yet. You said I should take it home, review it over the weekend, and come back Monday to make it official." More rustling. "That's right. So technically the 2018 will is still active." My heart sank. Michael and Sarah were right about that part, at least. Under the current will, Michael inherited everything. The house, my savings, my investments, everything Frank and I had worked for, everything I'd built since he died. "Harold, I need you to understand something. If I die before Monday, hell, if I die any time in the next week, it won't be natural causes." "Eleanor, I'm not being paranoid. I heard them planning it. They're going to kill me tomorrow night and make it look like an accident." The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then Harold's voice came back, harder than I'd ever heard it. "Those bastards." Another first from Harold. "Eleanor, we need to call the police." "And tell them what?" "That I overheard a conversation that could be interpreted a dozen different ways? That I think my son might kill me?" "Harold, you know as well as I do that the police can't do anything until after a crime's been committed." "But we can't just." "Yes, we can. We can be smarter than they are." I took a deep breath. Harold, Michael, and Sarah are partially right about one thing. My current will does leave everything to Michael. But what they don't know is what we can do with that information. I could practically hear the gears turning in Harold's legal mind. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we give them exactly what they think they want. And it's going to be the biggest lesson of their lives." We talked for another 20 minutes, working out the details. Harold's a sharp man, and once he understood what I had in mind, he was all in. By the time we hung up, I felt like I had a fighting chance. But first I had to survive the night. I drove home at exactly 8 o'clock, just as I'd originally planned. Michael and Sarah were in the living room watching television when I came in, looking perfectly normal. Sarah even smiled and asked about my day. "Oh, you know how lawyers are," I said, hanging my coat in the hall closet. "Lots of paperwork, lots of discussion." Harold wanted to go over every detail 3 times. "Everything settled then?" Michael asked, and I caught the sharp interest in his voice. "Well, we're getting there. Harold wants me to review everything over the weekend, and come back Monday to sign the final papers. I yawned, making a show of how tired I was. All that legal talk just wore me out. Sarah and Michael exchanged a quick glance, so fast I almost missed it. But I was watching for it now, alert to every gesture, every expression. "You should get some rest, Mom," Michael said. "You've had a long day." "I think I will." "Sarah, dear, would you mind getting my evening pills ready? They're in the kitchen." "Of course." Sarah popped up from the couch, all helpful concern. "The usual ones?" "Just the heart medication and the calcium. I think I'll skip the sleeping pill tonight. I'm tired enough already." I followed her into the kitchen and watched as she counted out my pills. 2 small white tablets and 1 larger yellow one. The same pills I'd been taking for months. She handed them to me with a glass of water, and I made a show of swallowing them while she watched. What Sarah didn't know was that I'd palmed the pills instead. They were tucked safely in my closed fist while I drank the water and thanked her for her help. "Sleep well, Nana," she said, kissing my cheek. The kiss felt like a betrayal all over again. This woman who'd lived in my house for a year, who'd called me Nana and baked my favorite cookies and listened to my stories about Frank. This woman had kissed me goodnight while planning my murder. I went upstairs to my bedroom, changed into my nightgown and got into bed. But I wasn't sleeping. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the settling of old wood, the murmur of voices from downstairs. I lay there in the dark, listening to my would-be killers moving around below me. Around 10 o'clock, I heard them talking again, but I couldn't make out the words. The television went off. Footsteps on the stairs. Michael paused outside my door. "Mom? You okay in there?" I made my breathing slow and steady, adding in a small snore for good measure. "MMM? What?" "Nothing, Mom. Just checking. Sleep tight." "Good night, honey," I mumbled as if I were half asleep. His footsteps continued down the hall to the guest room he shared with Sarah. Their door closed, and I heard the low murmur of conversation, but the words were lost behind the walls. I stayed awake until after midnight, long after their voices stopped and the house fell silent. Then I crept out of bed and made my way to the window. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the backyard where Frank had taught the boys to throw a baseball 40 years ago. Tomorrow night, if Michael and Sarah had their way, I'd be dead. They'd call 911, perform their grief for the paramedics and the police, and by Sunday morning they'd be planning my funeral while calculating their inheritance. But I had news for them. This old lady wasn't going down without a fight. I'd survived everything life had thrown at me so far. The Depression, World War II, widowhood, cancer, a heart attack. I'd buried my parents and my husband and more friends than I cared to count. I wasn't about to let my own son add me to that list. Not without a fight he'd never forget. I went back to bed and finally allowed myself to sleep, secure in the knowledge that Harold and I had set something in motion that would change everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, but also new opportunities. Friday morning came, and I could feel the tension in the house like humidity before a thunderstorm. It started the moment I walked into the kitchen for my coffee. Sarah was already there, bustling around with more energy than I'd seen from her in months. "Good morning, Nana," she chirped, practically bouncing on her toes. "How did you sleep? You look a little tired. Are you feeling all right?" The questions came rapid fire, each one laced with what I now recognized as false concern. Sarah kept glancing toward the stairs, as if she was already picturing me tumbling down them. "I'm fine, dear," I said, though that was far from the truth. I'd gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep, and every nerve in my body was on high alert. Just a little tired from all that paperwork yesterday. Michael wandered in a few minutes later, hair still messy from sleep, but his eyes were sharp and watchful. "Morning, Mom. Sarah's right. You do look worn out. Maybe you should take it easy today." There it was again. Take it easy. Don't overexert yourself. Rest. Every suggestion designed to make me vulnerable, to set me up for their version of an accident. "You know what?" I said, settling into my usual chair at the kitchen table. "I think you're both right. I am feeling a bit under the weather." The look that passed between them was electric. Quick, excited, like sharks scenting blood in the water. "Maybe you should go back to bed," Sarah suggested, already moving toward me with what she probably thought was a caring expression. "I could bring you some tea, maybe some toast." "That's sweet of you, but I think I'll just take it slow down here." I needed to be where I could see them, where I could control the situation. Being trapped upstairs felt too much like being cornered. I played my part perfectly over the next few hours. I complained about feeling dizzy when I stood up too quickly from the breakfast table. I mentioned that I'd forgotten to eat much dinner the night before and couldn't remember if I'd taken my morning vitamins. When I went to get something from the living room, I even stumbled slightly on the 2 steps leading down from the kitchen. That stumble wasn't entirely an act. The stress was affecting me more than I wanted to admit. My hands had a slight tremor, and my heart kept racing at odd moments. But I made sure Michael and Sarah saw it, made sure they interpreted it as weakness rather than what it really was, barely controlled rage. "Mom, you need to be more careful," Michael said, reaching out to steady me. The touch of his hands made my skin crawl. These were the same hands that had built sandcastles with me when he was 5, that had helped me plant my first garden after Frank died. Now they were the hands that might push me down those very stairs tonight. I know, I said, letting him help me to the couch. "I just feel so off today. Like I'm not quite myself." Sarah perched on the coffee table in front of me, all false sympathy and predatory attention. "Maybe we should call Dr. Martinez? Just to be safe." No, I waved her off. "I'm sure it's nothing. Just need to rest." Dr. Martinez had been my physician for 15 years. He'd also be the one performing my autopsy if their plan succeeded. Better to keep him out of this for now. Throughout the morning, I caught them whispering in corners, exchanging meaningful looks when they thought I wasn't watching. Michael kept checking his watch, and Sarah seemed to be mentally cataloging every symptom I displayed. They were building their case, creating a narrative for the authorities who would investigate my accidental death. Around noon, I made my move. "I think I'm going to try to eat something," I announced, getting up from the couch with deliberate care. "Maybe some soup? I'll make it for you." Sarah jumped up immediately. "You shouldn't be standing over a hot stove when you're feeling weak." "That's kind of you, dear, but I think I need to move around a little. Dr. Martinez always says gentle activity is good for circulation." What I really needed was to get to the phone without them overhearing. I made my way to the kitchen and busied myself heating up a can of chicken noodle soup while Sarah hovered nearby, ostensibly helpful but really watching my every move. "I think I left my reading glasses upstairs," I said after a few minutes. "Would you mind getting them for me? They should be on the nightstand." Sarah hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to help and not wanting to leave me alone near the stove. Finally, her desire to appear carrying one out. "Of course. I'll be right back." The moment she disappeared up the stairs, I grabbed the phone and dialed Harold's office. "It's time," I said when he picked up on the first ring. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Eleanor?" "Harold, they're circling like vultures. If I wait any longer, I might not get another chance. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up just as Sarah's footsteps sounded on the stairs. She handed me my glasses with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Found them right where you said. How's the soup coming?" "Almost ready." I stirred the pot slowly, deliberately, letting my hand shake just enough for her to notice. "I'm not sure why I'm so unsteady today. Maybe you should see if a little fresh air helps," she suggested. "You could sit on the front porch while you eat." The front porch, with its brick steps and concrete walkway. Another perfect place for an accident. "That's a lovely idea, but I think I'd rather stay inside. These old bones don't handle the cold like they used to." Michael appeared in the doorway, and I could feel the weight of their combined attention like a physical thing. They were studying me, measuring my weakness, calculating their opportunities. At exactly 3 o'clock, Harold's car pulled into the driveway. Through the front window, I could see him gathering papers from his briefcase, his face set in grim determination. "Oh," I said, glancing toward the window as if surprised. "Harold's here. I wonder what he wants." The doorbell rang, and Michael went to answer it. I heard Harold's voice, professional and warm as always. "Good afternoon, Michael. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I have some documents your mother needs to review." "Documents?" Michael's voice was carefully neutral, but I caught the sharp edge of interest underneath. "Yes, we had a few last-minute changes to discuss. Nothing major, but it's better to get these things sorted out sooner rather than later." Harold appeared in the kitchen doorway, briefcase in hand, looking exactly like what he was. A competent lawyer handling routine business. Only I could see the steel in his eyes. "Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced, but I realized we should finalize everything today rather than waiting until Monday." "Of course, Harold. Come, sit down." I gestured to the kitchen table, where the afternoon light would make everything clearly visible to Michael and Sarah, who had positioned themselves where they could watch and listen. Harold opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document, already prepared with signature pages marked by yellow sticky tabs. This was the moment we'd planned, the performance that would either save my life or seal my fate. "Now then," Harold said, adjusting his glasses and spreading the papers across the table. "This is the new will we discussed, with all the revisions we talked about yesterday." That was our code. The revisions we'd actually talked about were nothing like what was written in these papers. "I want to make sure you understand all the implications," Harold continued, his voice carrying the weight of legal authority. "This new arrangement will change everything about how your estate is distributed. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you." I picked up the pen Harold offered, feeling the weight of Michael's and Sarah's attention like heat on my back. "I understand completely, Harold. This feels like the right thing to do." The document Harold had prepared was a masterpiece of legal protection disguised as a routine estate update. While it appeared to be a standard will revision, it contained clauses that would make my murder not just unprofitable, but disastrous for anyone who attempted it. The key provision stated that if I died under any suspicious circumstances, defined broadly to include falls, medication overdoses, or any death that occurred before the following Tuesday, my entire estate would immediately transfer to a charitable trust. The St. Vincent's Animal Shelter, the literacy program at the public library, and the scholarship fund at the community college would split everything equally. But that wasn't the most devastating part. The will also stipulated that any family member found to have contributed to, encouraged, or hastened my death would not only be permanently excluded from any future inheritance, but would also face automatic criminal prosecution. Harold had included a provision setting aside $50,000 specifically to fund a private investigation into the circumstances of my death, should it occur within the specified time frame. Most brilliantly, the will included a clause requiring that all potential beneficiaries undergo polygraph examinations before receiving any inheritance, with the results admissible in both civil and criminal proceedings. "This covers all the contingencies we discussed," Harold said, pointing to various sections without actually reading them aloud. "The timing provisions, the investigation clauses, the distribution changes, everything you wanted." I signed each page with deliberate care, making sure Michael and Sarah could see my signature on every document. "There," I said finally, setting down the pen with a satisfied smile. "Everything's taken care of now." Harold gathered the papers efficiently, but left one copy on the table. "This is your copy, Eleanor. Keep it somewhere safe." The copy he left behind was carefully edited. It showed the charitable distributions and investigation clauses, but not the specific triggers or the polygraph requirements. Enough to terrify them, but not enough to reveal the full scope of their legal jeopardy. "Well, that's settled," I said, walking Harold to the door. "I feel so much better having everything finalized." As soon as Harold's car pulled away, I turned back to face Michael and Sarah. The looks on their faces were everything I'd hoped for and more. Pure, undiluted panic. Michael was the first to recover his composure, but his voice was strained when he spoke. "So, Mom, what exactly did you change in the will?" "Oh, just some adjustments Harold suggested," I said airily, moving toward the copy he'd left on the table. "Legal things. You know how complicated these documents can be." Sarah reached for the papers, but I scooped them up first. "I should put these somewhere safe, shouldn't I? Harold always says important documents need to be protected." I walked toward the stairs, clutching the papers to my chest, feeling their eyes burning into my back. At the bottom step, I paused and turned back to them. "You know," I said, letting my voice carry just a hint of the steel I was feeling inside. "It's funny how much better I feel now that everything's settled. Almost like a weight's been lifted off my shoulders." The look that passed between Michael and Sarah was pure terror masked as confusion. They had no idea what I'd just signed, but they knew enough to realize their timeline had just become infinitely more complicated. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I could hear them whispering frantically in the kitchen below. By the time I reached the top, their voices had risen enough for me to catch fragments. "Can't do anything now. Investigation clause. Have to wait." Perfect. Harold and I had bought me time, maybe more than time. We'd turned their own greed into a trap that would protect me indefinitely. But as I settled into my bedroom chair and looked out at the afternoon sun slanting across my yard, I knew this was far from over. Michael and Sarah were greedy and desperate, but they weren't stupid. They'd spend the evening trying to figure out exactly what I'd signed, and by tomorrow they'd be looking for ways around it. The game had just gotten more complicated. But for the first time since yesterday afternoon, I felt like I might actually win. Saturday morning arrived, and I woke up very much alive and breathing, much to what I could only assume was Michael and Sarah's disappointment. The sun was streaming through my bedroom window, and for the first time in 3 days, I felt like I could breathe properly. I'd made it through the night they'd chosen for my death. Downstairs, I could hear the quiet sounds of morning routine, coffee brewing, the refrigerator opening and closing, muted conversation. But something was different. The usual easy chatter between Michael and Sarah was missing, replaced by tense whispers and long silences. I took my time getting dressed, choosing my favorite blue sweater, the one Frank had given me for our 25th anniversary. If I was going to confront my would-be killers, I wanted to feel like myself. Strong, dignified, unafraid. When I finally made my way downstairs, Michael and Sarah were sitting at the kitchen table with their coffee, but neither was eating. They looked up when I entered, and I caught something that made my heart clench, relief mixed with frustration. They were relieved I was alive, but frustrated that their timeline had been disrupted. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, pouring myself a cup of coffee from the pot Sarah had made. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Morning, Mom," Michael mumbled, not quite meeting my eyes. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. Amazing what a good night's sleep can do." I settled into my usual chair and took a sip of my coffee. It tasted different somehow, sharper, more bitter. Whether that was Sarah's doing or my own heightened awareness, I couldn't tell. They were both unusually quiet, stealing glances at each other when they thought I wasn't looking. The weight of their unspoken communication filled the kitchen like smoke. Sarah kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, turning it around and around on her finger. Michael stared into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. Part of me, the part that had spent 45 years loving my son unconditionally, wanted to pretend Thursday had never happened. Wanted to go back to the way things were, when I thought I was surrounded by people who cared about me. But that was impossible now. I'd heard their true voices, seen their real faces. There was no one knowing what I knew. At exactly 10 o'clock, I set down my coffee cup and looked at both of them. "Michael, Sarah, I need you both to sit down. We need to have a conversation." Michael was already sitting, but something in my tone made him straighten up. Sarah had been rinsing dishes at the sink, and she turned around slowly, her face pale. "What about, Nana?" she asked, but her voice was strained. "Sit down, Sarah." She sat. I looked at my son. This man I'd carried for 9 months, felt kick against my ribs during those long nights when I couldn't sleep. This boy I'd rocked through fevers and nightmares, taught to ride a bike and tie his shoes. This young man I'd hugged goodbye when he left for college, worried about when he stayed out too late, celebrated with when he got his first job. This man I'd raised for 18 years and loved unconditionally for 45 years. And I told him exactly what I'd heard Thursday evening. "Thursday afternoon, when I came home early from Harold's office, I heard you two talking in the living room." My voice was steady, matter of fact. "The lawyer said the current will expire Saturday if she doesn't sign the new one. After that, everything defaults to the state." Sarah's face went white, but I wasn't finished. "So if something happens to her before Saturday, if she has another heart attack or falls down those stairs, we inherit everything automatically under the old will." I looked directly at Michael as I repeated his words. Those new heart medications can be dangerous. Sometimes people take too many by accident. And she's been so forgetful lately. I watched Michael's face go white, then red, then white again. The color drained from his cheeks like water from a broken vessel. Sarah found her voice first. "Nana, you must have misunderstood. We weren't, you heard wrong. We would never." "I heard every word," I interrupted, my voice cutting through her stammering like a blade. "Including the part where you discussed whether to make it look like a fall down the stairs or an accidental overdose. Including the part where you laughed about it being my last supper." Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But Michael just sat there in stunned silence, because he knew there was no explaining away what they'd said. He knew I was telling the truth. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice steady as steel. I was amazed at how calm I sounded, how controlled. Inside, my heart was breaking, but my voice never wavered. "You have until tomorrow morning to pack your things and leave my house." "Mom." Michael finally found his voice, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. The new will I signed yesterday? The one you were so curious about? Let me read you the relevant section." I pulled out the copy Harold had left with me and found the paragraph I'd memorized. Should the testator die under suspicious circumstances, including but not limited to falls, medication-related incidents, or any death occurring before Tuesday, September 15th, the entire estate shall transfer immediately to charitable organizations. Furthermore, any family member found to have contributed to, encouraged, or hastened the testator's death shall face automatic criminal prosecution, funded by a $50,000 provision set aside specifically for private investigation. Sarah actually gasped out loud, her hand flying to her throat. "But here's the thing," I said, folding the papers and setting them aside. I looked directly at Michael, this stranger wearing my son's face. "I'm not just disappointed in you for wanting my money. I'm heartbroken that you were willing to see me dead for it. And that tells me everything I need to know about the man I raised." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Mrs. Henderson's dog barking next door. Normal sounds of a normal Saturday morning, while my world fell apart in the most civilized way possible. Michael finally found his voice, and when he spoke, he sounded like the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. "Mom, we weren't really going to, we were just talking. We were scared about the future." "Son," I interrupted, and for the first time, my voice cracked slightly. "There's a difference between being scared about the future and planning your mother's death. You crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." Sarah was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "Please, Nana, you have to understand. We're drowning in debt. The house, the credit cards, Michael's job." "Stop." The word came out harder than I intended. "Don't you dare try to justify planning my murder because of money troubles. Don't you dare." Michael looked at me with something that might have been shame, or might have been anger. "Where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere. That's not my problem anymore." I stood up, feeling older than my 78 years, but also somehow stronger. "You have until tomorrow morning. I suggest you start packing." They left that Sunday, loading their belongings into Sarah's sedan and a rented trailer. Michael tried to talk to me one more time as they were finishing up, standing in the doorway of the kitchen where I'd fed him thousands of meals over the years. "Mom, I know you're angry, but maybe someday." "Goodbye, Michael." He stood there for a long moment, maybe waiting for me to soften, to forgive, to be the mother who had always fixed everything for him. But that woman was gone, killed as surely as if they'd succeeded in their plan. Finally, he turned and walked away. I watched from the front window as they drove off, Sarah crying in the passenger seat, Michael's hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. When their car disappeared around the corner, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to grieve. 5 minutes to mourn the son I'd lost, not to death, but to something worse, greed. Then I got to work rebuilding my life. I called Harold the next morning and changed my will one final time. Everything now goes to Robert and his children, with substantial donations to St. Vincent's Animal Shelter, the literacy program at the public library, and the scholarship fund at the community college. Harold also helped me install a security system and arrange for my bedroom to be moved to the first floor. No more vulnerable trips up and down those stairs. Michael tried calling a few times over the next month, but I didn't answer. Sarah sent a letter 6 weeks later, pages of apologies and explanations that I threw away without reading. There was nothing either of them could say that would undo what I'd heard that Thursday afternoon. You might think this story ends sadly, and in some ways it does. I lost a son that week, not to death but to greed. But in another way, I gained something precious. The knowledge that I'm stronger than I knew, smarter than they thought, and that I won't spend my remaining years looking over my shoulder. Last month, Betty Murphy at the coffee shop mentioned that she'd heard through a mutual friend that Michael and Sarah are getting divorced. Apparently, when the money didn't come through and they were forced to face their financial problems honestly, their marriage fell apart too. Greed, it turns out, isn't a solid foundation for love. As for me, I'm still here, still breathing, still very much alive. Robert drives up from California every few months to visit, and my grandchildren call me every Sunday. I've joined a new book club, started volunteering more at the animal shelter, and even taken up watercolor painting. Every morning when I wake up in my new first-floor bedroom, I smile and think, good morning, world. Nana Patterson is still here, and she's not going anywhere anytime soon. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply living well, and living longer than those who bet against you. I learned something important that week. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands by you when everything falls apart. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is protect yourself from people who don't deserve your love, even when it breaks your heart to do it. Especially when they're your own son. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and like this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to know the country in which you are listening to this story. Which country is that? Please comment below.